I would like to welcome Rabbi Tzvi Freeman. So for any of you who may not know, Rabbi Freeman is, first of all, a senior editor at Chabad.org. I'm sure many of you have browsed through the incredible website, and he's a senior editor there. He is the author of several very enlightening books, including Bringing Heaven Down to Earth. I actually have that one and love it. And Wisdom to Heal the Earth. He writes Chabad.org's highly popular Daily Dose of Wisdom, and he's at work on a new remarkable translation of the Tanya, which will be called Tanya in Plain English. His talk today is called Finding Yourself in Tanya.
There was a little village where people rode horses and wagons were pulled by horses. And one day, one young man comes home with the first automobile. Nobody's seen an automobile before. Maybe they've heard of them, but nobody's seen one before. And he drives in an automobile. So everybody crowds around to look at it. How does it work? And there's this young man's dad. And dad's chewing his tobacco. And he says, "Son, it's a nice horse, but you got to take care of it." He says, "Dad, it's not a horse, it's an automobile." Let me tell you, I have some experience. Let me give you some advice. First of all, make sure you feed it well. "Dad, it's not a horse, it's a car." Make sure you feed it well. Only give it the good oats. Don't give it the bad oats. Don't give it old oats. Give it only good oats. "Dad, it's a car." He says, "Well, let me tell you another thing. When it's cold outside and bad weather, keep it in the barn. Don't leave it outside." "But Dad, it's not a horse." Says, "Oh, hold on. Let me tell you another thing. You have to groom it well. Don't let any bugs get into its coat. Make sure it's always clean, always. And besides that," he said, "you have to check that it doesn't get ill. Check its teeth once in a while. Check its stools. Make sure it stays healthy. But Dad, I'll tell you another thing. Don't drive your horse too hard. Always make sure it doesn't get overheated. Can't get too hot. Make sure it gets enough rest. Take care of your horse. Dad, it's a car." So tell me something. The old man's advice, was it good advice or useless advice? What do you think? Is it okay? Is it important to give your car the right gasoline or just any old gasoline? If you leave your car out in bad weather all the time, will that affect the car? If you drive your car till it gets overheated, is that good for the car? So it turns out really that all the advice that the old man gave his son is really good advice. It's just that the son needs to be smart enough to figure out how to extrapolate, or how, like we say in Chassidus, to strip out the outer covering and get to the inside of the advice. And then the advice is applicable. But we have to know how to make that, what we call a paradigm shift, but keep the knowledge from one place and apply it to another, which can be difficult. But when it comes to something like Tanya, we really need to do that. That's vital. It's written into the book. It's written into the preface of the book. So let's get, first of all, what's the difference between our times and the times of the Alter Rebbe? What are the similarities? And how will we be able to transfer this knowledge from one place to another? Just want to note that if you're going to say, how could you say things have changed to the point that our Aveda is going to change, that it's going to be different? The Alter Rebbe says himself so. If you did today's Shir Tanya, Chitas, we see that the Alter Rebbe says in the times of the Shas, Talmudic times, the principal Aveda was learning Torah. Today, the principal Aveda, he says, is tefillah. Something changed. At their times, he said, a person could just think for a moment and say Shema, and immediately was inspired, filled with light, connected. In our times, takes a lot more work, a lot of work. Have a whole Psukkah de Zimra was added on. And you have to go through all the Birchas Krishman, you have to think, you have to focus, which was at one time not necessary. So yes, things change, and we'll see more of how things change. Just wanted to point out that it is in Shir Tanya today. So when is the Alter Rebbe writing Tanya? When is he formulating these ideas? It's really what we would call, for Jewish people of Eastern Europe, this is the cusp of modernity. At the time that the Alter Rebbe is composing Sefer HaTanya, the French Revolution is changing the whole of Europe, the face of Europe. Shortly beforehand, his part of the world, which was Belarus, which was part of Poland originally, was completely transformed. There was a famous, on the day of the passing of that year, of the passing of the Maggid of Mizrich, which was 250 years ago this year, the Tsarina of Russia, Katerina, and the emperor of the Hungarian Austrian Empire, and the Bismarck of Prussia sat down and decided we're going to cut up Poland, divide up Poland. Poland was where most of the Jews of the world lived at the time. They decided we're partitioning it. Why? Because the country can't defend itself. So, and we are huge empires. And instead of us all fighting over it, let's just sit down with a map. Prussia takes this chunk, Hungary takes this chunk, and Russia takes a big chunk. Nice, neatly divided. We said, we'll leave this other little piece there for a little while, and eventually we'll chop that up as well, which was eventually what happened. So suddenly, Poland moved from the Middle Ages into becoming 18th, 19th century Europe. Katerina was trying to swiftly Europeanize Russia. So Jews were suddenly faced with the modernity, everything that had happened in Europe over several hundred years, and Poland had been left behind. They were suddenly now there. So French Revolution, Katerina's modernization of Russia and the partition, this is a new world. And now the Alter Rebbe sits down to write a very different type of book, a book for the everyman, Sefer Shel Beinanim. In other words, every book until now really is either a book for you people, but mostly a book for the tzaddikim. There are people who are great scholars. There are people who are lesser scholars. There are people who know a little bit of Torah and learn every day. People who don't know much Torah and have to be taught by somebody else. People who don't know any Torah. And so you have people who are books for these people, books for those people. The Alter Rebbe writes a book for everybody. And he takes the deepest secrets of the Torah and shows how not only makes them accessible, but how they apply to every person. That's very radical. That's something different that's happening now. Okay, it started with the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov came along and showed how every Jew, no matter what level this Jew was at, which place in the ladder the Jew was at, could serve Hashem with simcha and with joy and with love. And in that way, he sort of flattened this pyramid, this structure. There was suddenly every Jew, and this disturbed the Torah scholars to no nth degree, that the Baal Shem Tov is sitting around with these simple people and telling them that they're just as endeared to God as the great scholar. But this was the way of Baal Shem Tov, and it's something very, you could say, modern. It's part of the modern world. It's something that's very Torah type of modern, because Moshe Rabbeinu did the same thing. Moshe Rabbeinu had all of the people stand there at Har Sinai, and all of them received the Torah together. It wasn't like everybody else did, that there's a prophet who hears the truth and he delivers it to his students and the students to their students. Well, it wasn't that way. It wasn't like in Egypt where you had the the Khartoumei Pharaoh who knew the truth, and the simple people who just had to follow instructions. No, Moshe Rabbeinu wanted everybody to learn Torah. So the Baal Shem Tov was doing something that was very Jewish, but nevertheless, it was still revolutionary at the time. The Alter Rebbe said, okay, the Baal Shem Tov said that every Jew can immediately connect to Hashem, have immediate, we call dvekus, a bonding, immediate access to this love, that the hidden love that's in the soul of every Jew, to the essence of the soul, immediate. Now we need to write a little book to show people how to do it. The Baal Shem Tov says, this is what you can do. The Alter Rebbe says, I'm going to show you exactly how. I'm going to take you by the hand and step by step, this is how you do it. But it is very radical, this flattening, okay? Flattening of things. So, but he's on the cusp of modernity. You read literature of the time, you don't find your voice there. It's not for another 60, 70 years that we find people that we can identify with, that we feel are part of our era to a degree. It's pre-industrialization. There isn't communication. You're still traveling by horse and wagon. So what are the distinctions between the Alter Rebbe's times and our times? The first one I would say is, okay, the Alter Rebbe's time, this is a book for every man, but mamish everybody? Not mamish everybody. And you can see that he's assuming a lot when you're reading the book. He's quoting statements from the Talmud and assuming that you know the rest of it and what he's referring to. He's quoting all sorts of verses from Tanakh that if you don't know what it says over there, you don't really get it. And we're talking about learning Tanya, even with children, with everybody, with somebody off the street who doesn't know that Moses took the Jews out of Egypt, and we're going to learn Tanya with this person. Mamish, I'm sorry, I can't translate mamish.
Mamish is really, truly.
No, it doesn't. It means like you can touch it with your hands. That's what mamish means. Okay.
Palpable.
You just have to hear the way I say mamish and you know what it means, I hope. Mamish, okay. Everybody, okay. That's one thing. Let me point out some things where the Rebbe pointed to the distinctions between our times and visceral mamish. Yes, viscerally. Okay, let me tell some of the things that the Rebbe pointed out. This is an interesting one. The Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, he spoke about how when they put a soul inside a body, it has to be matched. It has to be fair. So if you take, and it has to work. If you take a very lowly soul and put it in a very coarse body, it's not fair. The soul is going to have a hard time. It's just not a fair match. On the other hand, if you take a very, very lofty soul and put it in a very refined body, are you going to think that's fantastic, right? No, it's not going to work. It's like taking a torch, a blowtorch to a little wick, and it just burns up just like that. It's gone. If you take, what about a very great soul with a very, very coarse body? It might work, but it could also be a plan for disaster. And some of the great, most wicked people of history were exactly that, great souls inside a very coarse body. So it looks like the best thing really, as counterintuitive as it may sound, really is to have a very lowly soul. It's still connected all the way up, but it comes out like a very fine light sort of thing. Inside a very refined body. So there's four possibilities, right? I don't have my chart ready, I'm sorry, but you have to draw the chart yourself. There's four possibilities. You can have, there's high souls, low souls, high bodies, low bodies, right? So you can have a very high soul with a very high body, not going to last too long. Poof, it's gone. Have a very high soul with a very low body, that could be a plan for big disaster, catastrophe. This person could destroy the world, like Nimrod. And then you have a very low soul with a very low body. Oh, this guy's got it tough, really tough. And then you can have a very low soul with a very high refined body. And that could work. That could work. I'll explain how it could work. So what are the souls of our generation, of our times? The Alter Rebbe, we don't have his, he didn't write this down. His son, the Mittler Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Ber, wrote it down and explained. And he said, in our times, we have low souls with low bodies. And therefore, what do you have to do? You have to break through this lowly body to allow the soul to shine through. And Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe of Lubavitch, he repeats the same thing about his generation, but he doesn't stress so much how lowly the body is. The Rebbe said the same mimer, the same explanation over in 1952, I think it was. And the Rebbe said, in our generation, on the heels of Mashiach, to have to translate Mashiach, in the heels of Mashiach, we have very lowly souls in very refined bodies. And so, the way we have to work, we have to learn to see the divine in a very material way, in our world around us, to see the hashgacha pratis, the divine providence in each thing, to find the divine in our world. And our main job is in action. So it's, in other words, it's a very different generation. And you see another thing, how the Rebbe talks about, the Rebbe reverses the process of teshuvah. Person wants to return to God. Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, it's a step by step. First, you have to turn away from evil, surmeira, start and regret the past, accept a new future, and eventually you'll get up to, we call the higher level of tshuva, which is a yearning, a great love for God, and just learning a lot of Torah, a lot of energy to moving upwards. The Rebbe said several times, actually many times, that today we start with the higher level tshuva. Start by doing, start with love, start with being drawn to the light. And when you're doing that for long enough, could be years, could be decades, and eventually you'll come to regret the past. Amazing thing. But we start at the top level. So things have changed. And all this is besides the language, of course, has changed very much. And not just the language, the lexicon, the understanding that we have of these words and the way we talk about things. And the context, our entire context to it has changed. Our style of life, the way we live, has changed dramatically. Due to technology and the type of work that we do today, women have much more access to knowledge, to information. Everybody has more access, but women are in a very, very different situation they were today, because at one time it was just impossible. You couldn't be a woman, especially if you're taking care of a family, and in the workplace together with men, because the type of work just didn't allow that. And the amount of work that it took to take care of a home just didn't allow that. And all sorts of other conveniences that we have just didn't allow that. So technology has put women in a very, very different place than they were even back then. So what do we do? So how do we get from the horse to the automobile over here? How do we transfer this information? But you're seeing the problem. I saw there was some stuff in the chat, but I'm not seeing. I've got to find a way to see the chat on this little tiny screen over here, because I see some stuff is happening there. Finding or drawing the light down to Malchut. Yeah, we're bringing it all the way down. Like the Rebbe said at the very beginning when he accepted the position of being a Rebbe, our job is to bring it all the way down to earth. Okay, the Alter Rebbe also talks about bringing it down, dir b'tachtenim, but not in the way that the Rebbe talks about. The Alter Rebbe talks about bringing it down to earth, meaning bringing it from your mind into your heart. The Rebbe talks about bringing it down to earth, means on the street, wrapping a Jew in tefillin, getting a woman to start going to the mikveh, all the way down. So it's a much greater step. So what does the Alter Rebbe tell? Does the Alter Rebbe in Tanya give us a way to be able to bring it into our generation? So there is a preface to Tanya. The Alter Rebbe wrote a preface. Well, actually, he didn't write it as a preface to Tanya. Originally, the way the Tanya was distributed was in little pamphlets, handwritten pamphlets that were just copied by hand, person to person. These were being distributed amongst the Chassidim. And when people got hold of these little handwritten pamphlets, they had all sorts of questions. And so what did they do? They traveled all the way to Liadi, to get answers to these questions. So they traveled to Liozna and everybody's there, but you couldn't get in to see the Alter Rebbe. There was a whole protocol. And when people did, they got their answers, they got the private answers. We're supposed to go back and explain to other people. I don't want to hear from you. I want to hear from the same Rebbe. I'm going also. So it got too much. So the Alter Rebbe sent out a letter explaining to people what to do and how to approach these pamphlets, these contrasim. And when finally he had to actually publish the Tanya and print it, and there was a huge number of copies relative to those days being published. I think the first printing, 15,000 in the first year, which is huge in those days. He used this letter as the preface to Tanya. So what does he say there? So he says, let me just try to summarize this. He says, basically, everyone needs private counseling. It's not one size fits all. Everybody's life is different and they need their own personal counseling. But it's not possible. I can't do it. Okay, so in here, in this little book, is everyone's personal counsel. But the problem is, it could be very difficult for you to find it there. So what are we going to do? It's there, but how are you going to find how it speaks to you? So he says, I'm relying on my friends. I'm relying on those that know me and that have been here and heard from me and understand, and they will counsel others. In other words, you need a mashpia, you need somebody who can tell you. Okay, that's in those times. You had those people who they came and they were close to and the Alter Rebbe sent out people to different places to be the mashpia, to be the mentor in that place. But what about us now? Oh, so first of all, we have a Rebbe who taught us, and I don't know if I'll ever get through all of the books of counsel that are there. We have this advice that's to our generation. Is that enough? I don't think it's enough. You have to work hard to understand how that counsel applies to you. You have to dig very deep in order to see how this applies to me. But that's part of Chassidus Chabad. Chassidus Chabad means you don't get anything until you put work into it. It has to be your own hard work. You cannot be spoon-fed. And your life, your own life, is really a commentary on Tanya. When you're struggling to understand something in Tanya, you need to look at your own life and what's happening in your life at the time to see how these things happening in your life help you understand Tanya. They say when the Alter Rebbe was writing Tanya, whatever he was writing about, he was experiencing. So if he would be writing about awe of Hashem, Yira, that's what he was experiencing. If he was writing about love, according to the kind of love that he was writing about, that was the love that he was experiencing. And he was writing about love of your fellow Jew, that's what he was doing. The same thing when we're learning Tanya, we look in our lives and see how does what's going on in my life or the things I've been through in life, how does that help me understand what's here in Tanya? You can't take anything straight from Tanya and apply it immediately in your life. You have to go deeper and understand. Try to connect to the neshama of the Alter Rebbe, which is the same neshama of all the Rebbeim, and connect to that neshama and see how is he speaking to me? What is he saying to me? What's really here? You have to struggle with it. Without any struggle, none of it is real. If the answers come immediately, they're not answers. The only true answers, the only real answers are the answers that come after a lot of thinking, working with it, struggling with it, with a lot of wrong answers along the way, until you finally get it. I mean, I can tell you personally that there are questions that sometimes after 10, 20, 30, 40 years, oh, that's what it's, now I get it. But that's real. If it doesn't happen that way, it's not real. That's the only way that it's real. So let's talk about some of the things in Tanya, some of the fundamentals in Tanya, and how are they applicable to us in some way. So first of all, I talked about this immediate accessibility. This is prime to Tanya. The Alter Rebbe starts off by saying that this book is to explain to you that which Moshe Rabbeinu said, Moses said to all the Jewish people before, on his last day of life. He said, don't think that this thing is too incredible, too wondrous for you. It's not up in the heavens. You have to climb up to the heavens to get it. In the times of Moshe had to go up the mountain to get the Torah from heaven. He's saying, no, but you don't have to do that anymore. That's been done for you. It's not me'ever liyam. It's not on the other side of the sea. You don't need another splitting of the Red Sea in order to access this. Ki karev elecha hadavar me'ed. It's something that's very close to you. It's within you, immediately accessible in your mouths and in your hearts to do it. In your mouth, meaning you to speak it, in your hearts to think it and to feel it and to do it. And this is the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, that what the Baal Shem Tov called dveikus, meaning bonding with God. It's cleavage or bonding with God is immediately accessible to any Jew. Immediately, any Jew has access to the very core of our souls, from which comes a very great simcha, a very great joy, a very great love, which overrides everything. Such a deep emunah, such a deep connection and faith that there are no obstacles. That's the path of the Baal Shem Tov. Instead of saying, this thing I got to take care of, that thing I got to take care of, I've got this problem, I've got that problem, how do I solve this? How do I solve? You access this nuclear energy inside you, this tremendous connection that's always there, this emunah, this hidden love, and from that just carries you above everything. That's really at the core of Chassidus, and that's what Tanya is about. Tanya is about how at all times and in all circumstances, you can always access that very core of your soul that takes you above everything. Nuclear energy, always available. Dr. Rebbe says, how do you do that? How do you get there? And he gives us a path called Chabad. Chachma Bina Das means how the mind works. You have a concept and you develop it and you come to a realization. In other words, vital to accessing this nuclear energy is the nuclear plant, which is study of Chassidus and intense contemplation of Chassidus. We call hisbeininus, which is this contemplative discipline where once you've learned, you now focus your mind on bina, havana, understanding these ideas, which doesn't mean understanding just, oh, he said this and he said that. No, what did he mean? What does he really mean? The art of thinking, it's something that gets sort of lost. How often do people stop and think? Simple experiment. Go sit on a park bench or on the boulevard on a park bench or somewhere and sit and start thinking. Within minutes, somebody's going to come by and ask if everything's okay, if they should call Hatzalah. It's a problem over here. Somebody's sitting here and thinking. But that's vital to Chabad, to think about what you've learned. What does this really mean? And how does it apply to me? What does it say? I have questions on this. Can I answer my own questions? I'll give you some neat hacks for thinking about Chassidus. One is a very useful one. You never really understand something unless you teach it to somebody else. It's advice that the Rebbe gave. Whenever you are learning, learn as though you are preparing a class. You're preparing to teach this to somebody else. Then you learn in a completely different way. So when you're learning something Chassidus, even if you're sitting in a class with somebody else, what should be in your mind is, how would I explain this to whoever? Have somebody explain it to her. Nosson Gurari would say, he told us once that thinking Chassidus is, how would I explain this to my bubby? Okay, how would I explain this to somebody who never had any familiarity with this? Because in order to do that, the only way you can do that is to get to, what does it really mean? You have to, we call it in Chassidus hafshata. You have to strip it of all of its outer layers to get to the core of it, in order that you can now put different layers on it to explain it to somebody else. So that's very useful. How would I explain this to somebody else? And that helps you think through Chassidus. And when you start doing that on a regular basis and thinking about the things that you learn, then when you're davening, you feel it's real. I'm actually talking to the creator of the universe. Wow, he's letting me talk to him? But me, I mean, I'm just not the type of things that I do, the type of things that I think, and nevertheless, he says he wants to hear from me. And he's listening to me, right? All the angels are singing, and he says, I need to listen to this young lady over here. She's talking to me right now. That's what's happening. So you start to understand, because yes, this is the God I was just learning about. And I am the Jew I was just learning about. And what's happening right now is what I was just learning about, and it's real. I'm doing a mitzvah, right? I'm lighting my Shabbos candles. I'm making challah. I'm smiling to somebody. That's also a great mitzvah. And I was just learning that any mitzvah that you do, you're immediately there. I mean, there, like in that real place, you have a connection with God. You are being God at that time. Wow. You're way beyond the angels. Okay, you learn about all these things, and then when you're experiencing them, it becomes real. The bridge between learning and thinking and the bridge between that and action in your daily life is the time of tefillah, where you have that experience of, he's actually here listening to me. I just want to give you an analogy that will help you. There's going to be a question. Okay, I'll hold on to, but just hold on with the question. An analogy that will help you. I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years. With all these people, everybody in Los Angeles has a script in their glove compartment. They're there trying to get their movie published on the screen. So everybody's into acting there. So somebody asked me, isn't it crazy? You take 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, and you're talking to a wall. I mean, what kind of a fantasy is this? So I told them, no, it's the opposite. It's exactly the opposite of what you think. I said, imagine the scenes. Let's say you're in an apartment, in a hotel on the 20th floor, and it's nighttime, and it's dark, it's raining, pouring rain outside, and a thunderstorm, and your beloved is lying in a pool of blood on the floor, and your cell phone is not working, and you hear the sirens in the distance, and what are you going to do? And then you say, cut the lights, cut the cameras. You turn to the director and you say, this script stinks. I want to change it. That's tefillah, that's prayer. When you take those 3 steps back, you're stepping out of the fantasy, and 3 steps forward to step into the true reality, which is there's just you and God, and this is the script, this is the story, and if you want it changed, you can talk to the director, and he could change it for you. So that tefillah, which somebody translated as prayer, tefillah, that connection time that you have every morning is that time for making the things you learn in Tanya and Chassidus real, so that you can carry them out. You can feel how real they are during the day as well. And so that you can feel that when you went shopping, and people still go shopping for food once in a while. Not everybody does it online. You're talking to the lady behind the cash register, and she looks like she's having a lousy day, and you talk nicely to her and you give her a nice smile, you can know at that time you had a connection with the essence of God because you were doing a mitzvah. Okay, I've got some few more things to say, but I see there's some questions that are burning right here. The first question, somebody's asking, how important is it to have a mashpia? It's vital to have a mashpia. How does one pick a mashpia? The first step to picking a mashpia is to not be picky. Because that's what I see most people who can't find a mashpia, it's because nobody's good enough for them. I mean, when you're going to a mashpia, it's not necessarily that this mashpia is the ultimate angel who knows everything. You're going to talk it over with somebody. And it's not going to be somebody who's going to tell you must do this or you must do that. It's going to be somebody who knows a little more than you, and you'll be able to talk things through with. So knows some Chassidus, knows some Tanya, has been through some things in life, and you can talk things through. I'm not going to say you must do this in life. And sometimes you feel, okay, sometimes I have to go to the Rebbe's ale. Sometimes I have to write a letter to the Rebbe. It's very hard to have a mashpia if you don't have friends, because a mashpia is just a deeper type of friend who's also you have a lot of respect for. Yeah, I just wanted to mention a few of the other things that are vital from Tanya, to transfer them from Tanya to our times. One of the most vital ones, a line that is repeated over and over again in Tanya, that the heart follows the mind. The mind rules over the heart, which means wherever the mind is going, the heart wants to follow. It's so vital because we're panicking all the time and our hearts are going wild. And it's so vital to know that you can sit down, take a deep breath, and just no matter where your heart is at, you start thinking and you realize that all these crazy thoughts coming into your mind are really not very mature and intelligent, and you are way beyond that. This is not you. The crazy thoughts when you're panicking, that is not you. This is a vital lesson from Tanya. People think that their thoughts, my thoughts are who I am. No, your thoughts are just crazy bubbles bubbling up from the bottom of the pot from your crazy emotions at that time. Your thoughts are not you. Thank you for repeating that. You can sit down at another time, you'll have completely different thoughts. You can choose what you want to think. And you can look back at those crazy thoughts. Oh, that was ridiculous. Why was I thinking those things? And you have to stay focused. That's why you can't exhaust yourself and you can't get you panic and those things. Is you have to always let your mind be in control. Control doesn't mean just control. You must do this. You meant like in a dictator type of control. It means get your head in the right place, especially in an inspired place. And don't take the crazy thoughts so seriously and the emotions so seriously, because you can do better than that. So you do. Just use your mind and think, always be monitoring like a sentinel. What is going on in my mind? Is it good things going on in my mind, or is it crazy things going on? Let me get my mind back to good things. I can switch it just like that. Switch my mind over and think the right things. Yeah, okay. That was important. There are many other things that are important, but maybe there's a few questions before we go, because I see your time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Rabbi Freeman. And I just want to say, like you said, we can just go on and on when we're talking about the Tanya and how relevant it is. I feel like, sometimes with learning Tanya, it could seem on the outset like it's more of an abstract kind of teaching, but when you, like you said, you really have to delve deep and really struggle with it, really learn it. You can actually see that not only it's so deep, but at the same time so relevant to our modern day-to-day life. What's really amazing, like you're saying, your thoughts are not you. I feel like, it's kind of telling us, like the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is teaching us that it really teaches us who we are and what we could achieve, that we're, like you said, you're so much better than that. You're capable of so much more, and to really understand our souls, to really understand who we are. It's really, and there's so much to really get deep into this. So thank you for giving us even a little glimpse. Somebody actually asked earlier in the beginning, you were talking a little bit about the levels of souls and the levels of a body, and you mentioned something about the fact that we are a low body.
Well, we're actually more refined bodies.
We're refined
today.
Bodies with lower souls.
Low
so
souls.
What does it mean? Somebody wanted to know, what does it mean to have a low body, a refined body? What is that?
A coarse body is something that has to be is full of itself and running after its own ego all the time, and has no sensitivity to the divine. So as much as the person will be thinking, it doesn't affect the person. So that's very difficult. And the advice the Alter Rebbe gives in Tanya is to break this body. So it's very fortunate that what the Rebbe says, that at the time, the generations at the heels of Mashiach, we have refined bodies. To me, it makes sense because Jews have went through a lot of suffering, and the suffering refines the body. So the suffering of past generations left us with very refined bodies. So that when we think Chassidus, it has a very direct effect on us and our behavior. It's just that it's harder for us to think. It's harder for us to really immerse our minds in these ideas and meditate on them and daven with them. But we've only got a little light in that neshama. We've got to make it shine as much as we can. And once we do, the body doesn't stand in the way.
Wow. Thank you. And I also wanted to actually add, somebody asked earlier, how important, is it really important to have a mashpia? And it's actually one of our Rebbe had a very few soul requests, bakasha nafshis, soul requests, that he really begged everybody to get a mashpia. And this was one of his requests to everybody, to really have a mashpia, because it's so easy to be subjective to ourselves and to misinterpret the things that we learn, to misinterpret our status of growth. And the Rebbe really begged that every person have a mashpia.
Right.
Just somebody that we can feel comfortable with, look up to, learn from.
Right. I was just pointing out that people are afraid to have a mishpia, because the mishpia is going to tell you, you must do this, you must do that. But that's not what a mishpia is. A mishpia is somebody you can talk things through and provide you some wisdom from their own experience. And that's the one thing that people are most eager to share, is the wisdom they've learned from their own experiences. And very often it just comes through the talk between the two of you. That's something neither of you would have been able to access on their own. You're able to come up when you talk through with somebody like that.
Yeah.
You live in an area, nobody lives in any area right now. We all live over the entire globe. Anybody on the globe is accessible to you. So your question is about balancing, finding a time for davening, which also finding a time for learning, and so on. That's one area where you need a mishpia, and you also need a lot of stubbornness. When Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses wanted God to forgive the Jewish people, the reason he gave that they should be forgiven, ki am kshei erefu, because they're very stubborn people. And that's the only way in the modern era that you can really make Chassidus part of your life, is by being very stubborn about things. This is my time for davening. I have my, whatever it is, it's half an hour, it's 15 minutes, whatever. This is my time for thinking. I need some time for contemplation. And no matter what, I'm doing that. And the whole world can be falling apart. Okay, if you're a mother, you have to find a time when the world won't be falling apart. You have those obligations. But everybody needs a time for themselves, and be able to use that time in the right way. One of the best ways is turn off your cell phone. Mamish, turn it off. And just to make sure you don't turn it off, leave it in the basement somewhere. And now you have some half an hour of time by yourself to learn a little bit and think about it and daven. So yes, it is hard. Nobody ever said it's easy. It's hard work. That's the difference. That's what Chabad is all about. That you are doing hard work, because it's not real unless it came through hard work. In Tanya, even fear of God is about love. It's fear of separation. This is the path of a chassid. Everything is about love of God. God is not a big ogre out to punish you for misdeeds. God loves you very much and doesn't want you separate from him, always connected to him. And sometimes that can be painful, but it's good pain. All pain is good.
So we don't ask for refuah shlema in that case?
Of course we ask for refuah shlema. The refuah shlema comes from getting a proper connection. You get up to a place where now you can accept this great light, this great energy, this great connection that you have, and it won't hurt, because you got bigger. It comes through bitachon. When you have trust, complete trust in God, then you've gone up to a higher level now. And the pain is no longer pain. The pain now becomes something good. So when you're wishing somebody a refuah shlema, you're helping them come up to that place where this will no longer be pain, but it will be good.
It's amazing to me, because when my father was dying, he was in incredible pain. And my brother, much older than me, who was completely not religious, kind of snapped at my dad and said, what kind of God wants you suffering like this in a hospital? Why would he punish you after being such a good chassid all these years? And my father said to him, it's the opposite. Hashem loves me enough and wants to have a very, very special place in Gan Eden for me, in paradise. And it's okay that I'm struggling down here, because I know that he has a bigger plan for me, and it's going to be okay. And it always bothered me a little bit. And now I hear it, and it really touches my soul. So thank you for that. Wow.
I'll give you by way of parable. Okay, so there was a This was in the 90s, and there was a New York Times journalist who wanted to interview a member of the mafia, because at the time, the mafia was completely falling apart. And there were all sorts of different theories why the mafia was completely falling apart. So he wanted to interview somebody in the mafia. He was afraid to interview him in a private place. He wanted to be somewhere in public where they'd always be in public. So they met at Disneyland. The mafia gangster, had never been in Disneyland. But they went into Disneyland together and they went on the rides in Disneyland. So we're talking about somebody who was a paid killer. And he's on these rides in Disneyland. And he's scared. He's shaking. And he's saying to the journalist, what is this place? This place must be hell. If there's a hell, it's this place. The rides were scaring him. Why? Because for him, they weren't rides. He didn't know the whole concept of rides. For him, life was looking around all the time, knowing where you are, and knowing who's looking at you, what's going to happen, be ready to shoot. And for a person like that, being on a fun ride where everybody else is having a great time was hell. So that's really life. In life, everything has a context. You can say, oh, that's a terrible pain. God is punishing me. Oh, I'm really bad. God hates me. Chas v'shalom. Then life is really, truly miserable. Or you can say, everything here, all of life is about connecting to him. That's what I'm here for. When my soul was up in Gan Eden, up in heaven, it couldn't have this connection. I had to come here to have a much, much deeper connection. And all of these things that are happening to me, these are tremendous, tremendous connections I have now. I'm rising up to a much higher place, and I'm changing the entire world through all of this. So then everything is good. Whatever you're going through, it's something you need to go through, and it's out of God's great love for you that he's pulling you and pulling you towards you. And you stop kicking and complaining, it's going to be a lot more fun. Also, what everybody tells you is you have to think good and things will be good. Thinking good means this is not that it will be good. This is good. What's happening to me right now is good. I can't see how it is good. I can't even start to imagine, to fathom how this could be good. It looks the opposite. But no, this is good. And one day I will look back, if in this world or from times of Tchias HaMesim, but at some point I'm going to look back and I'm going to see these were such precious moments. This was so good. So why am I complaining right now if it's all good? That immediately takes you up to a place where the goodness can come into the open and no longer feel like pain. You're asking right at the right time, because we're going into the whole story of Yosef Atzadik. And Yosef Atzadik is exactly going through that, where there's a destiny planned for him, and it's going to happen. And there's all these tribulations he's going through, and he can't mix in. It's just going to happen. But he's not passive. Wherever he goes, he does the best job that he can, because that's what he needs to do. When he's thrown in a pit and he ends up being a slave to an Egyptian, he does the best job that he can. He gets thrown in a worse pit. Okay, he does the best job that he can. They're in a prison, he does the best job that he can, whatever he can. He takes control. Wherever he is, he becomes the master of those circumstances. But as soon as he tries to influence his destiny and change that destiny, he messes up. He just has to know, wherever I am, what does God want me to do right now? God wants me to be working at this job and taking care of these accounts. Joseph did accounting. He did accounting. He's a neshama from all the world of Atzilus and higher, and he's doing accounting. But that's what he does. Okay, God wants me to. This is one of the basic Torah teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, is that God wants you to serve him in many different ways. Many different ways. Sometimes it's through learning. Sometimes it's through traveling. Sometimes it's by talking with simple people. Sometimes it's by talking with sophisticated people. Sometimes it's by cooking. Sometimes it's taking care of little children. In all your ways, you should know him. In everything that you're doing, that way is a way of connecting with God. So if now you need to go to the doctor, well, the Torah says you have to go to a doctor. And somebody who doesn't go to the doctor when they need to, the poskim say, Mischayev benafshay, is taking your own life in your hands, because the Torah says you must go to a doctor. So you do that. You're not trusting in a doctor, you're trusting that God will send his blessing through this doctor, because God wants there to be a world, and this is part of the world. The Alter Rebbe quotes Rabbi Chaim Vital, that this world that we're living in is rubo kakulo ra, which means almost entirely bad. So the question comes up, why on earth are we put here? Jewish people have suffered tremendously. The truth is most human beings have suffered tremendously. There is a lot of pain in the world. It's very paradoxical. It's such a beautiful, amazing world. And yet there is so much pain at the same time. So we say, well, the neshamas are put in this world, our souls are put in this world to change the world. And flip this over, that all the suffering and pain will become something very good, something amazing. That's why we are here. We all know that there's a lot of suffering in this world. We know that Jewish people have been through suffering. You can ask the questions over and over again. And if somebody wants to reject belief in God because of the Holocaust and because of all the suffering of the Jews in Europe and in Russia, okay, I can't argue with them. If you want to go that direction, basically have a choice in front of you. You can believe that the world is bad and God is bad and everything is bad and live through life that way. Or you can live a life believing that at its core, somewhere deep down, this is really all good. And you can live life that way. If you believe that God is bad, there's no reason to fight. There's no point to struggling against any of the bad. You should simply surrender to it. But if you believe in essence, at the essence, the core of our reality, it's good, then you'll go out there and be an advocate for those people and be a hero, a champion for changing this world and making it a place where those things cannot happen anymore. It's
Right.
your choice.
The point is that we can't change necessarily what's happening. God does run the world. We don't. And the point in learning all of this, and the point in trying to get a little insight, is to realize, whether someone shares their life or whether someone doesn't. I think everybody, as we get older, unfortunately, this is just the way the world is. Like the rabbi said, it is the lowest world, it is the darkest world, and it's full of suffering. And some people might have more suffering and some people might have less. Everybody does have something. And it's very painful. It's very painful. And the question here is, and why we're all gathered here with the rabbi, is because we want some insight into our life, into what we're experiencing, into what we're going through, to feel a little bit of joy, to feel a little bit of connection, to feel a little bit of closeness, and to ultimately be able to use that, not just to help ourselves feel lighter and a little bit more inspired, but so we can use maybe what we've been through and be a light to others and help others get through their challenges. Ultimately, really, that's in addition why we go through what we go through. I know for myself, different things that for years I've questioned, why me? Why am I going through this? And then when I've been so humbled to meet other people that have been through similar painful experiences, and I was able to help those people, that gives so much meaning to suffering. It doesn't make me feel like, I'm thankful for those experiences, but it gives meaning to it, and it gives you a role to be able to help other people. So, without taking away from the rabbi, I just want to, kind of add to it, like, there's nothing anyone can say to say, yes, what you went through, that was good. Like, no, I don't think anyone can even have the authority to say something like that. I think what we're trying to do here is to, for a moment, use our minds to learn a little bit and get a little bit insight into God, into realizing we may not understand his ways, into realizing there's so much we don't see, to utilize this as an opportunity to connect to him more, because we're going to still experience what we're experiencing. But when we, use these experiences as a moment for connection, it can ease a little bit of the emotional pain, because then we don't feel alone. We don't feel like a victim. Your life is still your life. The question is, how do you want to go through it? And we don't choose what we go through, but we choose how we go through it. And I've been through a lot of painful experiences. Okay. And there are times when I say, God, like, I don't like that you're my God. Why are you doing this? But he is still my God. And a few moments later, I'm like, you know what, but you're still my God. Can you hold my hand? Can you help make this a little easier? So you're going to have those back and forth moments. You're going to yell at God. You're going to love him. It's a relationship. But we use these times to learn about him, to connect with soul sisters, to learn some Torah so that we can realize this is still our life, but how are we going to view our life? So, nothing's going to take away what you've been through, and no one's going to try to say, don't be upset. But you're not alone, and you're not alone because God also still loves you no matter what, even if you feel like he doesn't. And that's really the point here.
Of our forefathers, you can read the story of Avram Avinu as a story of tremendous suffering, of Yitzchak, of Yaakov, all of them, tremendous suffering that they went through. And our forefathers in Egypt, tremendous suffering. When Avram showed that he believed in God, God said, Abraham, go to the land, and I'll promise you, it could be great there, you'll have many children. Avram went there, and there was a famine, and he had to leave. When God gave Avram finally one child, God said, take him to the mountain and sacrifice him. Emunah, the emunah that we have is not an emunah, it's not a faith that when things are good, we believe in God. We have believed in God and belief in God meaning belief that the world is essentially good. God is one good, and there is only one of him. We believe that under the most horrendous conditions. That's the Jewish soul. That's what it means to be invincible. I was a music major in university, and my mentor was a violinist, and he wasn't Jewish, he was Anglican. And we had many discussions. Most of what I learned in university, I learned from my discussions with him. He was a musicologist. One time we were having a discussion, we were talking about violinists, and I said to him, David, what's his name? David, why do you think it is that so many great violinists are Jewish? And he looked at me with such a disdain, like this type of look, like, who am I talking to? I said, what, David, what did I say wrong? And he said to me, you implied in your words that there are or have been great violinists who are not Jewish. I said, well, there's some great performers. And I started naming them. He said, they're violin players. To be a violinist, you have to be a Jew. All the great violinists are Jewish. They always have been. I said to him, David, why is that? He said, I'll tell you why. Because to play a violin has a very harsh, grinding sound. It hurts. It's a painful sound. And to be a great violinist is to take that painful sound and make it sweet. And that belongs only to the Jewish soul. Igeres HaKadosh was a letter that the Alter Rebbe wrote, a Skil Chabina. And over the pandemic, I memorized it and must have said it over thousands and thousands of times lying in my bed, talking about this type of trust, this type of a belief that whatever it is, it's good. And it's similar to chapter 26. You can learn that. I have a translation of it online. I could send the translation, but there are many good courses on trust and so on. I remember the time it was Hoshana Rabbah in 1984. And the Rebbe was talking on Hoshana Rabbah, and he broke down in tears. It was sobbing and talking in between the tears. The Rebbe said, the Torah answers every question, except for one. It doesn't give us an answer to. How could it be? What's the question? The Torah is, we can explain that the suffering is to bring you to something good and you need the suffering. But the question is, if God can do anything, why can't he give us all the good without the suffering? And the Rebbe kept on breaking down. He couldn't get the words out. He kept breaking down. Why? And finally, the Rebbe started saying, why the Torah doesn't answer this question. This is because if we would be given an answer, we would make peace with the suffering. And that is one thing God cannot tolerate, that we should make peace with suffering. The day will come when game over, we'll be able to know. But all the time that we're in this world, we have to rail and rant to God, why is there suffering in the world? And God's answer for now is, go and do something about it. For your own self, you can say, I'll have more trust, I'll have more faith. For other people, the doctor can't come to you and look at you in the hospital bed and say, just have more faith. No, he's the doctor, he has to do something. And all of us are doctors, all of us are here to heal the world. We're going to change it. If you want, I wrote up basically what I got from that talk, the inspiration from that talk, and a story called The Lunar Files. It's published online. You can find it. Just Google The Lunar Files or look at Chabad.org for The Lunar Files, but it's about that. So we'll all daven for, I saw the name up there, was in the chat. We'll all daven for each other and have a lot of faith. That's what it means to be a Jew.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Freeman. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I could say we really, really learned a lot today. Not just about Tanya, but about, really applying Hashem into our life in a very real way. I'm sure a lot of us still have some questions, and that's the way it is every time we join a class. You end with more questions because your mind opened, you got to learn a little bit. So thank you so much, Rabbi Tzvi Freeman. And as Dawn had mentioned, I think it would be amazing for whoever is not on yet to join the online class with ITDK, the responsive heart, a responsive heart. So you can go to basekhanawomen.org, and there, first of all, it'll always be updating you on the upcoming women's retreats, and it'll also update you on all the ongoing online Zoom classes. There's a wealth of classes going on, a community where you can connect to women just like here and be learning Torah and applying in all different forms. So a responsive heart, definitely, if this talks to you, you can check that class out. We're also having, like I said, the upcoming retreat in Florida at Emerald Coast, January 12 to 18. Check out basekhanawomen.org for that. And thank you again, everybody, for being here, for everybody's questions, and have a beautiful, beautiful upcoming Hanukkah holiday.